All right, the next thing we want to talk about is what we call fictitious forces. These are forces which aren't really forces, but people think of them as forces because they can be confusing. For example, let's say you're riding in a bus. As you're riding in this bus, you decide that you're going to get up and walk towards the back. Or walk towards the front. It doesn't matter. So I have the guy going forward this thing. And all of a sudden, a squirrel runs out. This is my squirrel. And the bus driver slams on the brakes. What happens to you? You go flying forward. Was there a force that accelerated you to the front of the bus? Well, from your point of view, it seems like there is. It seems like, oh, there's some force throwing me forward. But the reality is that's not the case. What's really happening is the bus has a certain velocity. You also have the same velocity. But the bus suddenly decreases its velocity. Your momentum, your inertia, wants to keep moving. Essentially, you want to keep going in a straight line at the same velocity that you had before. And so what's really happening is the bus is actually coming up to meet you. You're moving with the same velocity, but the bus is coming back towards you because it changed its velocity. So there was no force acting on you. It's actually inertia that makes you fall forward. If you were drawing a free body diagram of the guy, there would be no force pushing him forward. It would just be gravity downward. Okay? What makes you feel like there's a force is you think there's something that's making you fall forward. But it's just your velocity wanting to maintain its state of motion, which is inertia. Okay, this shows up more when we talk about circular motion. In circular motion, if you're driving and we're looking at a car from the top now, you're looking at your car. As that car makes the turn, all the occupants in the car, so if we're looking at them head down, here's their head sticking up here, they have velocity too, and initially the velocity is in the direction. But as the car makes the corner, the velocity is continuously changing direction, even if you're going at the same speed. And as it changes directions, your body wants to keep going forward, but the car is now going this way. The car feels an acceleration that way, which is our centripetal acceleration caused by the wheels on the road, the static friction between the wheels and the road. So what you feel is you feel like there's a force pushing you to the outside of the car. And people naturally do it. As you go into a corner, you lean in to counteract that centripetal acceleration. Okay? What you're really doing is you're really counteracting inertia. Inertia wants to go in a straight line. So your inertia makes you want to move in a straight line, or to continue in your straight line. But the car, because it's turning, is not going in a straight line anymore. So you feel a fictitious force, often called a centrifugal force. This is not a real force. It doesn't actually exist. That is just inertia. So if you do a free body diagram, you will never put centrifugal force there, because a centrifugal force is not a real force. But you're familiar with it. For example, here is a bucket with a bunch of styrofoam balls in it. When I spin this over my head like this, the balls don't fall out. But if I was going to draw a free body diagram on the balls when they're at the top, so here's my bucket, and the balls are in here, the free body diagram on that ball has gravity going down and the normal force from the bucket going down. There's nothing holding those in the bucket. So you're like, oh, there has to be a force holding them up because it's in equilibrium. But it's not in equilibrium. It's not in equilibrium because it's accelerating towards the center. It has a centripetal acceleration. Yeah? And technically what's happening then is as you go around, the balls are trying to fall out, but you're moving forward fast enough that that doesn't occur. So this centrifugal force, which is not real, is really just overcoming inertia. It's inertia that's keeping them in there. That's why there is a minimum speed you can go. Now this doesn't matter if you do styrofoam balls in a bucket. I can do water in a cup. So here's a glass of water. It's real water. Okay? And make sure I don't hit anything here. If I spin it around, I should be able to spin it around without spilling a drop as long as I keep the velocity high enough. So I'm just going to spin it around and you'll see none of the water goes out. I can go either direction, and as long as I keep going fast enough, the water won't spill out. Now, I'm not going to do it with the water because it'll make a huge mess, but I'm going to go slower with the styrofoam balls. You see, if I go slower, you can hear them move. And if I go slower still, they start to fall out. And if I go too slow, then they fall out. So there's the minimum speed you must continue for the balls to not fall out, or essentially to keep inertia holding them in place. And we already figured out what that minimum speed is. That's the minimum speed you have going in a circle. Remember when we were doing the tennis ball on a string, same thing. There was a minimum speed where the tension went to 0. That velocity minimum is equal to square root of GR. As long as you go faster velocity than that, the styrofoam balls will not fall out, and the water will not fall out. Okay? The biggest thing here that I want you to get out of this is the concept that there are fictitious forces that aren't real forces. They feel like forces acting on you, but they're not really forces. They never show up in a free body diagram.